This is every Minecraft feature that started out as a mod first, starting with the Ender Chest. Before we had Ender Chests in the game, they existed in this mod called Ender Storage, which with this version of it, we had a new chest that was added to the game that added 3 different color-coded options. And with those different colors, you could choose which one that your Ender Chest was linked to. So 2 chests of different colors couldn't link together like this. Almost like using different channels on a radio station, or some other reference that makes more sense for people born in this century. And while we didn't get the same implementation of that when we got our Ender Chest in 1.3, we did get some form of color coding when we got shulker boxes in 1.9. So there you go, this one's a twofer. Mo Creatures is one of the most famous mods that Minecraft's ever seen. And part of the reason for that is that this feature was added in from the mod. That is, before we got horses added into the game officially, they were highly requested due to Dr. Jark's version of them in the Mo Creatures mod. So much so that Dr. Jark actually helped out Mojang with the official design of the horse. And Jeb even thanked the good doctor for their contribution on Twitter. And while it's great that they were able to work together, it's also great that they changed the look of the horses after this. They look so much better now than they used to. This might look like a hopper, but it's actually a chute, which is just one of the many different blocks in Buildcraft that went on to inspire the way that we move our items in Minecraft. But what's even more interesting about the Buildcraft chute is that it actually was called the hopper, but changed the name when Minecraft used it in the vanilla release. I guess that would get pretty confusing, but it also makes the inspiration pretty clear to see. Before we had different stone types like andesite, granite, diorite, or even deep slate, the most that builders had to turn to was the likes of Industrial Craft and Chisel mod, because back then we got a lot of blocks that look very similar to the stone types that we have today, such as the marble that you would see in Industrial Craft, which looks very similar to the calcite that we find in our amethyst geodes. And perhaps the most frustrating similarity to these mods is that in vanilla, we also can't use our stone types to make different kinds of pickaxes. Same was true in the mod variants, which is a shame when you try to craft yourself a stone pickaxe, and you're left with the only option being a cobblestone pickaxe. Minecraft's Elytra completely changed the way that we travel around our worlds, or that is, it completely changed it to be very similar to the hang glider that you found in mods like OpenBlocks. And while that implementation was a lot more friendly for using earlier in the game, really just requiring some leather and sticks, it is interesting to note that for a brief time in the Minecraft snapshots, we could also repair our Elytra with leather, which would have been a lot better than having to deal with the kind of annoying phantoms that we do nowadays. I'm jealous OpenBlocks never had anything like that. When copper finally got added to Minecraft in the Caves and Cliffs update, it felt like a long time coming, largely because this had already shown up in a multitude of different mods before this. Things like Mechanism, Immersive Engineering, and Advanced Rocketry. They all had versions of this well before we even thought of this being in the game. And perhaps more frustratingly is that they also added a lot more functionality to copper than we ever saw in vanilla. It's really just a decoration block here. And while that does look nice, come on, it's no rocket. Dual wielding isn't a new feature to gaming. And before it was added in 1.9, it also wasn't a new feature to Minecraft. Since looking at something like the Mining Blade Battle Gear mod, they had a lot of different changes to the kinds of way that you could do combat in Minecraft, including the ability to dual wield weapons. Oh, and also have various different shield types. Well, we've only got the one shield variant here, but maybe that's why the mod's called Mining Blade and the game that we play is called Minecraft. Very different priorities. Back before 1.16, the Nether only had one biome type, the Nether, which is a far cry from how it looks today, but it is interesting to note that things like Biomes O'Plenty completely overhauled the Nether before there was even talks of a Nether update. In just that mod alone, there were 8 new biomes in the Nether that you could explore. And while I'm thankful that not all of these have transferred over, I don't think anyone wants to see flesh and hair blocks in the Nether biome. Things like the beautiful rose quartz spikes that you see while exploring the Crystalline Chasm, that I'd still want to see come to vanilla, even after 1.16. Back in the day, playing Minecraft could be pretty difficult. And not because of anything with the game's difficulty, but rather it was the last half of the game's name, craft. There were too many blocks and items and too many crafting recipes to remember. So a lot of us turned to things like too many items as a way to learn what we're crafting. And following suit, Mojang eventually added in the recipe book into our actual crafting UI, which not only let us look up a crafting recipe, but also let us quick craft, which was good news for all of us. And the Auxcast, it seemed like they had trouble remembering too. Before we had slime blocks to play around with in Minecraft, Tinker's Construct added in the congealed slime block, which except for the stickiness, actually functioned fairly differently to the ones that we got in the game. For one, there was no functionality with redstone, so things like Mumbo Jumbo's Walking House, you just have to download some other mod to do it. And also, the way that you would get these slime blocks is that you have to find them on small islands that generated in the sky. Whereas in vanilla, we just build a slime farm with an iron golem and do it that way. And this is one example where I'm actually thankful that we went a different direction from how mods were taking it, even though I love Tinker's Construct, just not this part. For the addition of a dark oak forest, the closest thing we had to this in Minecraft was through the implementation of the Twilight Forest mod, which not only added in the dark forest to remind us of the dark oaks that we have now, but also added in a whole bunch of other stuff that's still impressive today, which means it was even more impressive at the time that it came out. And one of the other features that you found in Twilight Forest were these familiar looking bunny rabbits. See, well before rabbits got added in 1.8, you'd also see these much smaller dwarf rabbits that were jumping around the Twilight Forest. Aside from also being rabbits, they look very different in design for what we got in today. And honestly, I'm surprised the mod is a more simple model than what we got in the game. But hey, they both have one that looks like an evil rabbit, just these ones are always passive. No Monty Python reference here. Before we had armor stands in Minecraft, how would you display your stuff? Well, if you had a mob like Bibliocraft, then you could actually make a pretty similar display to what we're used to today. And a point in Bibliocraft's favor, they also had an armor stand for every different wood type. But where the armor stands in vanilla shine is when you actually use commands to make the kind of crazy stuff that we've shown in videos in the past. But when you're in survival, Bibliocraft's a great alternative, especially when there was no alternative in vanilla. Before stained glass was officially added to Minecraft, it was teased in the early April Fools for Minecraft 2.0. But even before that, it existed in mods like Forestry that had stained glass variants as well. However, all the steps that it took to craft this was way more complicated than just using some dye. Since here in Forestry, you would actually need a thermionic fabricator, which you would then use with an ink sac and a wax cast to make yourself a stained glass pane. Which, if that sentence sounds confusing, it was confusing to say too. And I'm glad Mojang opted for the easy way out when they added in stained glass to their game. In addition to beating Mojang to the punch on the Elytra, OpenBlocks also had a scaffolding block before Mojang did. Though the way they did it was a little different. Since in the modded version, it would also break down easily if you broke it with your fist, but even if you forgot about it, it would eventually break down over time, meaning no more ugly scaffolding left around your builds, regardless of how sure you are that you're gonna go finish it. With a mod called Pam's Harvest Craft, you would rightfully expect it to add in a whole bunch of different crops and things to plant in your world. And while a lot of those still aren't in the base game, things like lettuce, lentils, and onions have never made it into Minecraft, it is true that before Minecraft Vanilla added them, this mod had its own versions of beetroots, carrots, and potatoes. Who knows, maybe that explains why the zombies dropped these items. They're just the husks of former players who played around in Harvestcraft. Gross. These are the parrots that we're used to seeing in our version of Minecraft, and these were the parrots that were added first to the Exotic Birds mod. And as you can see, these parrots were a lot bigger than the ones that we're used to. But they also had similar color schemes to the ones in Vanilla, which makes sense. They're similar color schemes to the ones you see in real life. Only so much inspiration that you can take. But what's interesting with this version of the parrots is that when you tamed them, their health would actually increase by quite a lot, going from 4 hit points to 10. And they also didn't make the fatal mistake of Mojang of adding in cookies for them to eat as well, which is something Mojang themselves had to backtrack and add in the fatal poison effect so that people wouldn't feed them chocolate in real life. Long before pistons were ever added into vanilla Minecraft, there did exist a mod back in the day called, quite simply, the Piston mod. I'll give you one guess what it did. And though they beat Mojang to the punch, these pistons look quite a bit differently to what we're used to. They were completely white in color, and if you activated them, they could launch both blocks and players. And it was because Mojang loved that piston mod so much that they would actually use a lot of the code for the mod to make their own pistons. Now, when you take away all the nostalgia, it's hard to argue that early versions of Minecraft didn't just look ugly. And a big part of that is that we didn't have things like smooth lighting to clean up our world. So if you wanted that back in the past, the best you had was a mod called Better Light by Mr. Messiahs. But it was because of that light by Mr. Messiah that Mojang was so impressed that they actually used the code and help from Mr. Messiah to eventually code the smooth lighting into the game itself. And as a thank you, Mojang would also give Mr. Messiah a unique cape, which in case it didn't feel cool enough for Ari to get a thank you from Mojang, an exclusive cape really bumps that up. Before tall grass made it into Minecraft, we had something called wild grass, which was a mod that added on an extra layer of grass on top of our regular grass to create a kind of pseudo tall grass. Though when we eventually did get tall grass into Minecraft, it was still significantly taller than the wild grass mod, which I guess is why it's not called tall wild grass, huh? Before Mojang added in other colors for your bed sheets, there were mods like Quark that had this first. And among the many different types of decoration blocks that they added to the game, one of those was a bed sheet color for every different kind of wool color in the game. But come on, when the original color of the bed was red, what other color do you need? You already reached perfection. Prior to the release of the Skulk sensor in Minecraft, we didn't have any form of wireless redstone. At least any kind of wireless redstone that didn't require a very complex system like this. So for players who wanted to use wireless redstone before that, one of the alternatives was a mod called Wireless Redstone CBE. Though really it should have been called Wireless Redstone BCE because this was added in before the common era of having it in the game. And what this mod would allow you to do was create different devices that connected wirelessly to each other. And then when you had a wireless transmitter, you could set the frequency and have a receiver that could receive that frequency and give you a redstone signal. Which I'm glad that we went with the Skulk sensor interpretation anyway. Don't get me wrong, this is cool, but it feels pretty close to the real world. Whereas the Skulk sensor hits the right balance of Minecraft's weird magic meets technology mysticism. Before redstone lamps ever touched the game's code, the mod Red Power 2 actually had its own kind of lamps. And while you could turn these on and off with a redstone signal, the part that I really missed the most is that these lamps came in different colors. Whereas ours are stuck to the same pattern, same frame. But I guess it's better than never having it in the game at all, huh? Iron nuggets were a surprisingly long time coming into Minecraft. And because they took such a long time to reach the game, it meant that other mods like Immersive Engineering and Thaumcraft had their own interpretation. I mean, it was kind of a layup when you had golden nuggets. So when Mojang added these in, it just felt inevitable. Before we ever crafted end crystals to respawn the dragon, there was a mod called Hardcore Ender Expansion that would let you also respawn the dragon. Though here, you actually had to use the dragon egg to respawn it, which hey, gave you used to the dragon egg. That's not something you see every day. And after putting this on a coal block to make a pedestal, you could bring back the dragon and fight it much the same way that we did the first time, except, you know, again. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?